Day one at Lord's, day one of the Ashes summer, day one of England versus Ireland, and well, there might have been day three at this rate. Vish, this test has proceeded at a rate of knots as expected, and probably also as expected, a familiar face has done most of the wrecking.
Yes, yeah, I feel like if you asked both teams who've in the build-up have spoken about how much they're not really focusing on this match. I think if you tell them, you know what, you might be done in 2 days, they probably would have shaken your hand privately and said, oh, go on then. And yeah, Stuart Broad, someone who I suppose is going into the Ashes not as part of a first-string attack, has just done Stuart Broad things at Lord's, if that's not a horrendous thing to say. But I think it was really interesting the fact that he mentioned last week that he wouldn't be sitting out this test in the way that it was assumed that Robinson and Anderson would before they'd got their niggles. He also made the quite astute point that he probably wouldn't be afforded the luxury to sit out this test, which I suppose from him was an acknowledgement that he's not part of that first 11, really, ideally if everyone's fit. And he did what he has actually talked about doing in the lead-up when he's been playing for Nottinghamshire in various county games, including here against Middlesex. He spoke of needing to be ready for this game, needing to be ready for the start of the Ashes, and sat in the press conference with 5 wickets. He basically said his job is just to be fit and ready to go, whether it's the first Ashes test or the last Ashes test. And I mean, he's put, I was going to say he's underlined his quality. He hasn't really, he's just restated it.
And it wasn't just him. I mean, there was Josh Tongue on debut, didn't get any wickets, but I mean, he looked like he got proper wheels, didn't he? I mean, he was picked ahead of Chris Wokes, which a bit shocking given he averages 11 on this pitch. But he did show that, especially in the absence maybe of Jofra Archer and Ollie Stone, and Mark Wood probably won't play every game. Having someone who's going to fire it in with a bit of bounce is not a bad thing to have up your sleeve.
Yeah, it's interesting because of the way England are approaching bowling under Ben Stokes and Brendan McCullum. There was a point today where I thought I actually felt a bit sorry for him because he was bowling a lot short into the pitch, and he was hitting the bat hard, but it felt like he wasn't bowling. Certainly, the fields he was given weren't to bowl full and maybe get that first wicket. And then I thought, well, actually, that's your role, isn't it? That's what you're in the team to do. So that's what you just have to be good at. And I actually thought he acquitted himself very well. His first spell was very good. There were a couple of loose deliveries towards the back end. I thought it was interesting. I spoke to a few people at Worcestershire, his county, and one of the things they said is that he's generally been about averaging 83, 85 miles an hour, but on a bigger stage, in front of a bigger crowd, certainly with the backing of having an England badge on his shirt, they reckon he'd push 87, 88. And there was a couple clocked at 89 today. And it's clear that he, coming into a team where they are now used to a fast bowler. This is a very different England team from 3 years ago. They know how to work with fast bowlers. They know how much they have to manage them, not least because they've lost a few of them in the last 6 months. And I thought they used him very well. Now, he might have to get his head around bowling like that because he certainly doesn't bowl like that in county cricket, because why would you? Because the pitches are generally quite dreadful, with all due respect to the curator at New Road. But I thought, by and large, it's quite positive, yeah.
And obviously the day wouldn't be complete without England teeing off at nearly 7 runs and over. So much said about Zach Crawley, and obviously Ben Duckett, who incredibly is playing his first match of any sort in England, for England. But they rattle along without really breaking sweat, didn't they? And it's kind of ominous when you think what could happen if Harry Brooks, say, comes in with England already 200 to the good, and golf course is looming, really.
Yeah. I mean, it already has the whiff of an innings defeat, doesn't it, for Ireland? It's funny because I think Duckett is a player they originally thought Crawley was, and now Crawley is just allowed to be Crawley. We were looking at the wagon wheel in the press box as it was happening, and almost half of his runs in that half century came via the inside edge. And he didn't care. And the reason half of them came through the inside edge is because he just kept playing that way. And ironically, he got out middling one straight back to the bowler. But they have this really lovely balance. I think they were talking about it on Sky. I think we've written about it, certainly at the start of that Pakistan tour when they both scored hundreds on the opening day in Rawalpindi. Because they're left and right, because one's tall and one's short, they're incredibly hard to bowl to, and they clearly have a great understanding. And Duckett scores quickly, doesn't really take any risks. He's a very different Duckett, from one that started all those years ago in Bangladesh. And it's almost like Crawley is now more cavalier, and he's really leaning into that, whether he's talking about, not caring what the average Joe or the average punter thinks. I think he's almost embracing this inner demon that's, the darkness is slowly consuming him in some way.
And there's really not an awful lot to say about Ireland. They've toiled well. Fionn got a debut wicket, which I suppose was the highlight of their day. But as Heinrich Milan said, they didn't really cover themselves with glory. Let's hope they can have a better day of it at least tomorrow. At least the sun's shining. And hey, we're at Lord's. It's not all doom and gloom for them. And it's certainly teeing up the summer from an England perspective pretty nicely.
Thanks for watching ESPN on YouTube, and for more sports highlights and analysis, be sure to download the ESPN app, and for premium content plus live streaming, make sure to subscribe to ESPN Player.